top 15 tight end rankings heading into week 16 here. The first one's Travis Kelce of the Kansas City Chiefs. Each and every week, Kelce's been the number one guy on my rankings. And where you drafted him in the second or third round this season, he's been great, is Travis Kelce. And last week, he had a good game versus New Orleans. 12 targets, 8 catches, 68 yards, a touchdown, and a 2-point conversion. And this week, he's got a good matchup, is Travis Kelce versus the Atlanta Falcons. The Falcons here, they really can't stop anyone. Kelce, he finds the end zone each and every week with 60 or plus yards. And once again this week, I think he could find the end zone twice with 80 to 90 yards in this one. This guy's a starter. Next year, he'll be the number one tight end again, but for the week, he's number one. Number two, Darren Waller. Raiders. Waller, what a season it's been for him, and he's been a great fantasy tight end. This week, he does have a tough matchup, though, versus Miami, but this is a guy you can't bench. He has games where he just explodes, like last week in week 15, 9 catches, 150 yards, and a touchdown versus the Chargers, and all that damage was done with Marcus Mariota in there at quarterback. But this week, I don't think the numbers will be that great for Waller, but I still think 70 and 80 yards, and he could possibly find the end zone, and he's been a great fantasy player this year, and a lot of teams in the championship who have Waller, he definitely paid off for your team, and this week he'll have another good week. Number 3, T.J. Hockenson of the Detroit Lions. Hockenson, he's been very consistent this season, but last week it was a bad week for him. 4 targets, 2 catches, 18 yards, and a fumble loss for Hockenson. But this week versus Tampa Bay, this is a game where Detroit's going to have to throw a lot. They're back home this week, and the Lions offense, they just play better at home the whole season for whatever reason, even though it's pretty much the same thing with no fans pretty much at every stadium, and they're indoors. But Hockenson this week, I think he bounces back with a 6 or 7 catch day for 80 and 90 yards, and he possibly finds the end zone. Like I said, they're going to throw a lot. Kenny Golladay, he's probably going to be out once again, and Hockenson, since Galladay's been out, his numbers have been huge this season, so I think he has a good one. Number 4, Logan Thomas of the Washington football team. The last 3 weeks, Logan Thomas, he's been putting up crazy numbers at the tight end position, and last week on 15 targets, he had 13 catches for 101 yards versus the Seattle Seahawks, and this week he's got a great matchup versus the Carolina Panthers that really can't stop anyone as well. We saw Tonyan find the end zone last week versus him, and this week I think Logan Thomas has another great game. I don't think as good as the one he had last week, but I think 8 or 9 catches are possible for him for 80 or 9 yards, and he can find the end zone as well. So Thomas, what a season it's been for him, and if you're in the championship and you got him at tight end, good for you. Number 5, Robert Tonyan of the Green Bay Packers. He's on some streak as Tonyan with 5 touchdowns in a row in his last 5 games. And this week versus Tennessee, I think he finds the end zone once again as Tonyan. It's not even all about the yards with him. He could get 20 or 30 yards, but that touchdown obviously is huge for 6 points. This week it's going to be a shootout, I believe, versus Tennessee and Green Bay. And Tonyan last week, 3 catches, 18 yards, and a touchdown versus Carolina. This week, I think he does a little bit better. But for the 6th straight game, I think he finds the end zone. Number 6 at tight end this week, Mark Andrews versus the New York Giants. Andrews, he was struggling a little this season, but the last few weeks, he's picked it up just as this Baltimore Raven whole offense as a whole has. And last week, he had a decent game, 5 catches, 66 yards, and a touchdown. And here versus the Giants, I think it could be a similar type of ball game for Mark Andrews. He's making plays. He's healthy now. Lamar Jackson, he's looked way better the last few weeks. He's starting to throw that ball down the field, and I think Andrews has another good one here. So he's number 6. Number 7, Hunter Henry of the Los Angeles Chargers. Henry, he's been pretty solid this season, and last week he showed up once again with a good game versus the Vegas Raiders. With 7 targets, he caught 5 of them for 65 yards and a touchdown. And this week, he's got a good matchup versus another division rival in the Denver Broncos. So I think Henry, he's going to find the end zone once again. This season, he's finally stayed healthy, which is a good thing, is Henry. So I think he finds it again, like I said, the end zone. And he's going to have a good week. Number 8, Rob Gronkowski of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Gronk, he's been a touchdown-dependent tight end the last few weeks, and last week he didn't have a great game at all. He only had 3 catches for 29 yards versus Atlanta. But this week, I think Gronk, he does find the end zone in Detroit. It's another indoor game, which is good. Him and Brady, they were on the same page. He still had 7 targets, which was a good thing last week. But this week, hopefully Gronk could step it up and make a big play. And Gronk, each and every week, you don't know what you're going to get from him. But with his potential and his playmaking ability at the tight end spot, I got to keep him in the top 10. Number 9, Noah Fant of the Denver Broncos. It was about time Fant broke out. In this game, he finally made it through the whole game without leaving with an injury or an illness. And in Week 15, he went off in that ball game versus the Buffalo Bills with 8 catches, 68 yards, and a touchdown. And this week at the Chargers, I could see Fant have another decent game. We just saw Waller go for 150 and a touch versus them last week. So Fant, it could be a 50 or 60 yard type of day. And him finding the end zone once again. So he's number 9. Number 10 at tight end this week, Dallas Goedart of the Philadelphia Eagles at the Dallas Cowboys. The Cowboys, we know the problems they had. San Francisco with a bunch of backups scored over 30 points in the game versus them. So this game probably will be a shootout or Philly blowing them out. This is how I could see this game going. And Goedart last week, it wasn't a great game for him. 4 catches, 39 yards versus Arizona on 8 targets. But this week versus Dallas, I think him and Zach Ertz both have big games in this one. And Jalen Hurts, what a season he's had since he started in the last few games is Hurts. I know it hasn't resulted in wins for Philly, but this Philadelphia team, their offense is moving the ball better. Everyone's making plays, and I think Goedart, he could get 30 or 40 yards and possibly find the end zone versus Dallas this week. So I got him in number 10. Number 11, Eric Ebron of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Ebron, he's having a great season this year, but the last few weeks he tailed off a little. And last week, it just didn't go right for him or the Steelers after an embarrassing loss to the Cincinnati Bengals. Ebron only had 1 target, and he didn't do anything with it. And this week, versus one of his former teams in the Indianapolis Colts, where he had a huge season a few years ago when Andrew Luck was the quarterback over there. So Ebron, I think he has a bounce back. I'm not expecting a huge game out of him, but I still think he's going to be decent, and I still could trust him as a starter. So he's the 11th tight end. Number 12, Mike Gesicki of the Miami Dolphins. Gesicki were back-to-back 23-point fantasy games until he didn't play last week in Week 15. But this week here in Week 16, if he does play, he's got a great matchup with the Las Vegas Raiders. That teams, they just go up and down the field against, and tight ends have success like we've seen over the last few weeks. So Gesicki, he's been a prime target of Tua Tagovailoa, surprisingly, the last few weeks. And if he could play, I think he has another decent game this week. I don't think he's going to reach 20 fantasy points plus, but anywhere from 9 to 12 is possible. And that's not a horrible game considering the inconsistencies and the struggles this season it's been in at the tight end position. Number 13, JONNU Smith of the Tennessee Titans. JONNU Smith, he's just been up and down all season and touchdown but dependable. Last week it was good to see him get double-digit fantasy points in PPR leagues with 5 catches for 52 yards for Tennessee. And this week he's got a decent matchup versus Green Bay. This is a game, I think it's going to be a high-scoring game, back and forth. This game's big for both teams. The Packers fighting for the first-round bye, and Tennessee fighting to get into the playoffs here. So this game, it's going to have a playoff feel. These players, they're going to have to make plays, these big players. And I think JONNU Smith could make a couple plays in this one. I don't trust him 100%, but at the 13th spot is where I'm going to rank him. Number 14, Evan Engram of the New York Giants. The last few weeks, his numbers haven't been great. He was on a good stretch in the middle of the season. But Engram now this week with a tough matchup in Baltimore. But the volume's still there for Engram. 7 targets last week, 4 catches, 46 yards versus a middle-of-the-pack Brown team. And this week versus Baltimore, I think the Giants, they're going to be down early and often in this one, where Daniel Jones or Colt McCoy, whoever's going to start the game, is going to have to pass the ball a lot in this one. And Engram, he's a good player. He's a matchup problem. He moves like a wide receiver at the tight end position. And this week, I think Engram still could have a good game in Baltimore. So he's number 14, and the 15th and final tight end is Austin Hooper of the Cleveland Browns. Talk about inconsistent. This guy's the definition of it. One week he could get 2 or 3 fantasy points, and then the next we could see him like he did in week 15, get 5 catches, 41 yards, and a touchdown for 15 fantasy points in PPR leagues. And this week he's at the New York Jets, so he deserves a spot here in the top 15. But Hooper, it wouldn't surprise me if he has another dud performance after coming off a great performance last week. So that's the top 15 tight ends I'm ranking here heading into week 16.